WNST show snow shoveling. Yes, so that's what we'll be doing all week long here. I'll tell you what, the Capitals have been out on ice out in California, and their game has gone on to ice. Ed Frankovic here to discuss all things a lost weekend in California. You know, I've had a lot of fun in California over my period of time, Ed, but I never tried to play 3 hockey games in 4 nights while I've done it. I have done that whole let's go to the Bay Area for 2 days and go to L.A. for 2 or 3 days. This was, you know, I would say unexpected to a large degree, but also sort of human nature, right?
Yeah, this was a terrible trip. I think Mike Vogel wrote after Sunday's loss that this is the first time since 1999 they've gone on this trip and haven't gotten a point. And a lot of people are very concerned about the way they're playing. The puck's not going in. They're not working hard enough. But we may have an explanation in the post-game Sunday night following the loss on Caps Radio. Brooks Orpik made a very serious statement. He said this team needs to focus on hockey. And Mike Vogel asked a follow-up question, and Brooks Orpik basically said, we don't need to elaborate, so you can let your imagination run. But it sounds like the Capitals partaked in a lot of extracurricular activities in California and weren't focused on hockey. So I guess they didn't read my blog from last week when I said part of the slow starts are probably a function of not being focused and dialed in, and they certainly weren't focused or dialed in California. They played 3 games. They took 17 penalties. Kevin Shattenkirk got suspended for 2 games. It was pretty ugly. It was bad hockey. They hung the goalies out to dry, and it was just unacceptable.
Well, and then there's the goalie rotation where Grubauer played on Saturday night, and I know you were very, very prescient about the Kings needing the game and the Caps not needing the game, and that was just Saturday. Look, they always struggle against the Sharks. We know the Kings are playing for their lives. They've fared better historically over the Ducks, but they sleepwalked on Sunday night. And you know, I guess that bye week will also, you know, many fans were alluding to the bye week they had last month, but there is no bye now. They got to come back. They got to play Minnesota on Tuesday. They got to play Nashville on Thursday. They go down to Florida, talk about good weather. You know, they'll be escaping the bad weather. Who knows whether they're going to get the game in on Tuesday night or not. They're coming home to, you know, a little bit of a sticky situation. Now, that being said, you know, I've watched the Terps go to 20-2 and not look so good over the last month. It's not an area where you want to trend in the wrong direction, especially for a franchise that historically has not fared well in April and May.
No, and this is they're very fortunate that they have 27 days and 14 games before the playoffs.
You've done the math on that. Okay.
They just have to find a way to get back to playing the right way. Their efforts have been terrible. That's why you're seeing so many penalties. There's guys not going to the nets. I mean, Coach Trotz talks about shooting percentage and those type of things. And I think your shooting percentage is a function of where you're shooting the puck from. And they're shooting the puck from too far out. They're not shooting enough either. And they're just not working to get to the front of the net like they had been doing during that streak. And you know, maybe the New Jersey and Philadelphia game got them a little off their game because they packed it in. But, you know, Dallas, you and I were together Monday night last week against Dallas, and Dallas certainly skated. They didn't pack it in. And in San Jose, LA, and Anaheim, they didn't play that way either. And they skated with the Caps. The Capitals they couldn't match them. They couldn't match the intensity. They were terribly sloppy coming across the blue line. It reverted to an old form where they're trying to make that extra pass, and instead of putting the puck on net or putting the puck deep, they're trying to go cross ice, and they got in trouble with it and put themselves in positions where they took penalties and they just, frankly, they weren't working hard. They weren't focused on hockey. I think Brooks Orpik's post-game interview on Sunday night summed it up. You know, we got to get back to being focused on hockey, and it's on the leadership to do that and the players to follow. I feel very bad for the goalies because I really felt that they tried to keep the Capitals in both games as long as they could, hopefully, especially Sunday night in Anaheim. He was dynamite in the first period. But when Lars Eller gives the puck to Corey Perry for a layup to start period 2, it just took everything out of them, and they're mentally weak right now. They're focused on other things, and they're not playing hard. So it's a recipe for no point.
Long flight back in the middle of the night. The Caps landed into the early morning on Monday and get back after the storm on Tuesday against Minnesota. Ed Frankovic can be followed at Ed Frankovic out on Twitter. It's been 2.5 weeks now since they played a good game, right? That Rangers game, you would say, is the last time that they played well. Even the Devils game, even the OT win over the Flyers, they haven't played well in a couple of weeks. You wonder where that motivation comes from. And you also, wonder their level of health. And here come the Penguins as well. This little stretch of losing has now put the President's Trophy very much in peril. The Penguins just a point behind now with a game in hand.
Everybody's bunched up. The Penguins are right there. The Blue Jackets aren't far behind. The Rangers, they lose Lundqvist for 2 to 3 weeks, and they're only 5 points back of the Capitals. So I don't want to, Burakovsky's out, but the Capitals have no excuses. The Penguins have been ravaged with injuries. They've been playing without Chris Letang, Trevor Daley on the back end, and Carl Hagelin just went down for 4 weeks, which might carry into the playoffs, and he's the guy that traditionally kills the Capitals. And the Penguins keep rolling. Now, the Capitals are playing some tougher competition, but I got to give credit to the Penguins. They're amping their game up, and the Capitals aren't. The Capitals, they've taken a month vacation here. If Brooks Orpik's right, and the focus hasn't been on hockey since February 11th, this team has been on hiatus.
Well, the Ducks and the Sharks are pretty good teams, right? I mean, it's not like they went out to California and saw the dregs of the league. They did not. They saw two teams that are going to be in the playoffs, and they saw a team that is trying to get into the playoffs. So, you knew they were going to get some punches last week. And Ed, I know I did a lot of hockey last week. I talked to Joe Beninati. I talked to Al Koch, and I talked to a lot of people last week. Everyone was a little concerned about the West Coast trip because it's a West Coast trip. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do without focus, and they were stumbling going into it. And, we saw that against Dallas on Monday night.
Yeah, the starts weren't good before that in that Dallas game. I'll give them credit. They did start better in San Jose, and they did start better in L.A. They got the leads, but again, they lost their focus and took penalties. And you can't give up 17 power plays in 3 games.
The penalty thing's not a trend. It's a way of life. It's who they are, right? Like, it's almost getting to be Oakland Raiders-y, right? Like, this is what they do. They're going to draw. They're going to have penalties, not draw penalties, have penalties.
It's just, they need to stop that. I mean, Ryan Kessler certainly stirred it up on Sunday night, going after Nick Backstrom, and I give Tom Wilson credit for standing up for him. But usually when those type of things happen, the Capitals usually bond together and up their intensity, and that gets them into the game. And Alan May certainly thought after the first period on Sunday night that would be the case, but it went the other way. I felt like the Ducks, who I think are next to the Flyers, are probably the dirtiest team in the NHL. They certainly just felt like they could run roughshod over the Capitals.
Well, once it was 3-0, they could.
Didn't have an answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed Frankovic joining us here. The Capitals this week. What do we know about the Minnesota Wild? Certainly the Nashville Predators at this point. I think what we know is the Minnesota Wild expects to be much like the Capitals. Playing well into May and into June for the first time in a long time. They are the best team in the West.
Yeah, they've had a great season. Bruce Boudreau took over, and we all know what Bruce can do to a team. He tends to give a team a spark. And
it's amazing that they allow that much cursing in the state of Minnesota, right? It's usually pretty...
Yeah, and he just seems to get a team to start playing better offensively, and they certainly have some players there, and Zach Parise and Eric Stahl has found some new legs this season after spending his career in Carolina, getting traded to the Rangers at the deadline last year. Certainly a dynamic player, and they got Ryan Suter on the back end. They played well as a team, and they're dealing with the Blackhawks in their division, so they're in a tight race too. But Minnesota, they're going to have a hard time getting out of their division. They could easily be the cream of the crop in the West, but I think the West is pretty wide open. But they're certainly a very good hockey team, and it's a tough one for the Capitals to come home and play after this California trip. But I think it's good for the Capitals. I think they'll be motivated to play Bruce in the Wild, and they're going to need some home crowd. Who knows who all will be there? We don't know what the weather's going to be like, but I think that they're going to have to get some traffic. Devin Dubnyk in net has been outstanding, and the Capitals haven't shown a willingness to go to the net. I mean, outside of maybe T.J. Oshie, I haven't seen many guys go in the net. Justin Williams he scored almost 20 goals already this year. I think it was 19. That was going to the net. He's not going to the net now. I haven't seen enough Marcus Johansson going to the net. Just a lot of guys are playing too much on the perimeter. It's something we saw back in December before the light went on and they had that great run when they were working hard and going to the net. They're just not doing that right now.
He can be followed out on Twitter at Ed Frankovic. And we're going to see if they're going to play some hockey on Tuesday night. The schedule says Minnesota, Thursday, Nashville, Saturday, the Tampa Lightning. The Caps may get this thing even crunched up a little bit more than that on their scheduling if retakes have to be made with the Snowmageddon airing here in our community. 12 inches of snow in March. What are we thinking here, Ed? All right, man, rest up. I know you were up late all weekend long with these games out in California, the lost road trip of the Washington Capitals. Ed, we're going to be talking about this one for a couple of weeks, right? It's going to take a little while to wash this one out.
Yeah, there's a lot of stench left after this trip, if you will, and they really got to find a way to get their game back and get dialed in. And I'm happy to hear that the leadership stood up after the game in Anaheim, kind of kept the locker room closed for a little while, and hopefully they snapped some attention into the guys. I actually was, Ovechkin still hasn't scored in forever, but I actually thought his game looked like it was coming back, especially Saturday night. He had 15 shot attempts. He had 8 on Sunday night. So I'm seeing some better signs from the grade 8, but they got to put the puck in. They're missing the net. They're hitting posts. They're not getting in close. They're not making it hard for the goalie. So let's see if they can do that this week and get this thing turned around.
All right, man, rest up. We got plenty of hockey this week. You can follow Ed at WNST.net or Ed Frankovic out on Twitter. I will be on Twitter as well, monitoring the Caps. We're getting ready for Terps action, getting ready for snowstorms, getting ready for the WBC this weekend, as well as the Caps and the Wizards, and, of course, the Ravens free agency. Any more breaking news from the Ravens or anywhere locally, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday, getting you ready for the Maryland game. Tips at 6:50 on Thursday night against Xavier. Meantime, we'll be watching the Caps and the Wizards, amongst other things, and as well as some spring training baseball, even though the Orioles are a little fractured right now with their star players running around with the Dominican and the U.S. teams, as well as John Scope trying to get himself back from the other part of the world. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook and our YouTube WNSTV channels. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.